Let's begin now.
How's everyone, Grant here, and welcome to my camera comparison video between the Google Pixel 4a, Pixel 5, and Samsung Galaxy S20 Fan Edition. And so the Pixel 4a retails at $350 US, while the Pixel 5 and S20 FE both retail for $700. And so I'll show you a bunch of photos and videos in both good and low light conditions to help you decide which of these three phones is going to be best for your camera needs. By the end of the video, I also hope to answer questions about, is the Pixel 5 that much of an upgrade over previous generations of Pixels if you're looking to make that jump just based on camera performance. I also hope to show you how much the $350 Pixel 4a brings to the table as far as camera performance at $350, and should you spend twice the money on a Pixel 5 or an S20 FE. And so with that being said, this is a sample of the rear-facing cameras indoors at max resolution here. I've got a LED light to assist to give you a better idea of if you've got some extra lighting and you want to film some content, what that might look like with some assisted lighting. I can actually turn that off here, and this will give you a better idea for what it would look like with just basic home lighting. I've only got a ceiling light above me going, so this is kind of what you would expect from these cameras indoors with just basic lighting. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the photos and videos, and let me know in the comment section which one you think is doing best.
Downtown, I got that heat, let's go.
Hey everyone, so here we are in the park testing out the cameras on the Pixel 4a, Pixel 5, and the Galaxy S20 Fan Edition. So this is being shot at 1080p, 30 frames per second. So let's go ahead and pan over. You can see the blue skies, a lot of the greenery here, so this should give you good color for the color profiles on each of these cameras. As I pan over here to the cell tower, we'll do some zoom test. So let's go 2 times on the Pixel 4a, 2 times on the Pixel 5, and this is 3 times on the zoom lens on the S20 FE. And so we can try max zoom on each. So that's 5 times digital on the Pixel 4a, 5 times here on the Pixel 5, and we'll go and see if we can get up to about 5 times there on the S20 FE. And this can go all the way into increments of, let's see, we've got 10 times if I zoom in that way, so that's 10 times digital, and all the way up until 12 times zoom here on the FE versus 5 times on the 4a and Pixel 5. So zooming it back out on all of them, we can go ahead and test focus here on the post. So autofocused with the 4a, refocus. So focus here on the 4a seems to be nice and snappy. And Pixel 5. Pixel 5 also looks to be pretty snappy on the focus and the refocus. One more time. And the S20 FE. There you go. Refocus. One more time. So it looks to be pretty quick, and maybe a little bit more shallow depth of field on the S20 here than the Pixels. There we go. And we'll walk down the stairs and do stabilization test here, which they all should do pretty well here in 1080p. They all have full stabilization going on. But let me know which one you think looks the best. And one more pan around here on the park. See how it handles some of that direct afternoon sunlight there. Okay, so here we are back in the same scene in the park, this time being shot at 4K 30 frames per second on all 3 phones. Now the Pixel 5 and the S20 FE can shoot in 4K 60, but the 4a can only go to 4K 30. So to keep this fair, I'm going to keep this at 4K 30 frames per second across the board. And of course the Pixel 5 and the S20 FE also have ultra wide angle cameras, and it's good that you actually switch between them while filming your video. So there's ultra wide on the Pixel 5, and there's the wide on the S20 FE. Now the S20 has a much wider field of view, as you can see here, than the Pixel 5's ultra-wide camera. And of course there is no ultra-wide on the 4a, it just has that single lens. But of course I can also move back into 2 times zoom here on the Pixel 5, that's pure digital zoom. There's no telephoto zoom lens there on the Pixel 5. And there's 3 times telephoto zoom lens there on the S20 FE. So let's just switch back to the main lens here. And again, just really nice that you can switch between the lenses on the Pixel 5 and S20 FE while you're actually shooting the video. So let's resume our normal test. Pan over here to check out the zoom at 4K. So that's 2 times on the Pixel 4a, 2 times on the Pixel 5, 3 times zoom lens there on the S20 FE. And of course this can go all the way up to 12 times digital on the S20. Looks a little bit shakier there at 4K than it did at 1080p, but it could be stabilizing once I get this off in post, but we'll see. And I can go 5 times zoom here on the Pixel 5 and 5 times zoom there on the 4a, which looks very steady and clear there in the viewfinders. So if I back this all the way out on all 3 phones, we can go ahead and test autofocus in here in 4K. First with the Pixel 4a. Still looking nice and pretty snappy here. And also with the refocus, looks good. Pixel 5, again, same thing. Nice and quick focus and refocus. And with the S20 FE. Again, nice and snappy. Again, a little bit more of that background blur or shallower depth of field on the S20 to me. And we'll walk down the stairs to test out our stabilization here in 4K. Which I think will still be good, as they all stabilize in 4K. It's just which might be doing it better. You let me know. And one last pan around the park here. See how it handles that light in the afternoon sky. Hey everyone, so here's another stabilization test on all three of these phones. This time I've got super steady mode on the S20 FE. I think that takes the resolution down to 1080p. The Pixel 5 has multiple stabilization modes, so I've got that on active, which is the most stable mode, and I believe that also takes it down to 1080p resolution. And the Pixel 4a is still in its 1080p with its natural video stabilization turned on. So let me know if you see any difference here in the stabilization between each of these phones. I want to see if the Pixel 5 and the S20 FE actually are noticeably more stable with these extra stabilization features. And so I know it's kind of silly to run because I'm not sure how many people actually run and shoot video, but I think it's appropriate to really see if there's a difference when using these max stabilization modes on the Pixel 5 and S20 FE. So there you go. Let me know if you notice any of a difference and what you think about the stabilization here. Hey everyone, so here's some front-facing footage from the Pixel 4a, Pixel 5, and the Galaxy S20 FE. So this is all being shot at 1080p 30 frames per second because that is the limit on the resolution and frame rate on the Pixel 4a and Pixel 5. Now the Galaxy S20 FE can shoot all the way up to 4K 60 from this front-facing camera. And the Pixel 5 has the benefit of actually cropping in a little bit and zooming back out. So if you want a little bit more in frame, you've got that flexibility with the Pixel 5, and that seems to put it kind of on par with all three phones here. Now I'll go ahead and kind of pan around here so you can see how it handles into some of the changing lighting conditions. You can see the sun is back out that way, so you can see what that does to the video and image quality there. You can see the sun shining through up there. And we'll pan all the way back around this way. And we'll go ahead and do a little bit of walking here so you can see the stabilization from the front-facing cameras. So I just want to give you a quick clip here from all three of the selfie cams, and hopefully this gives you a pretty good idea of how each of these phones perform here from the front-facing cameras for shooting some video. Hey everyone, so here's another quick clip from the front-facing camera. This time I've got the Galaxy S20 FE at 4K 60 frames per second, which is its highest resolution frame rate. The 4A and 5 are still at 1080p because that's its max resolution there. And the Galaxy S20 FE does not have any video stabilization at 4K. So 4K 30, 4K 60, there is no stabilization on the front-facing camera on the S20 FE. Stabilization is on at 1080p on the 4A and the 5. So again, I can pan around real quick so you can see some motion. I don't know how well this will come across on the S20 FE, the 60 frames, because I'm going to downsample this to 4K 30 for the YouTube video, but just to give you an idea, see if you can see any of a difference there. And here's some movement, so you can see the stabilization or lack of stabilization on the 4K on the FE. So here's a quick comparison on 4K on the FE to 1080p on the 4A and Pixel 5.
Get it, get it. Get it.
Hey everyone, so here's the usual low light test I've been doing in my camera comparisons recently. So I've got the Pixel 4a, Pixel 5, and the S20 FE. So as I pan over here, you can kind of see how it does into that bright light. And I'll switch between the lenses on the Pixel 5 and the S20 FE. So ultra wide on the Pixel and on the S20. And then I can switch into the telephoto on each. See how that looks and performs. There we go. We'll pan this way and go up into the bright light and get back to the main lenses, FE, Pixel 5. So you can see how it's doing it, that light, how it's handling it, any kind of lens flaring there. It looks to be the worst on the lens flaring here on the FE, and Pixel 4a and Pixel 5 seem to be about the same, but that's a really bright light, so I would expect some level of lens flaring there. And we'll turn around this way and start walking into a bit darker condition here. So obviously that was a pretty well lit situation there, so you can kind of see how each of the phones performed, and hopefully you can also see how the stabilization is working here in a bit of low light. See if you see any of those low light jitters or not. And as we move into a darker area, you'll see how it handles that changing lighting condition. So here we go. It's pretty dark out this way. You can see the only lights here are the ones that are illuminating the sidewalk here. And I can pan up into the night sky. You can see how dark that is. And I'll pan around this way where there's a little bit more light, but it's still a fairly dark alleyway here. So you can see how it's handling that amount of light on each. A little bit of autofocus there on the FE. So I'll tap the focus, see if that brings it back. There we go. So just a quick test in 1080p on each of these phones and some low light. Okay, and here we go again with the same test, this time at 4K 30 frames per second on each phone. And again, I'll pan around this way. You can see how it does into that bright light in 4K. And I'll switch to the different lenses on the Pixel 5 ultra wide and the ultra wide here on the S20 FE. And I'll switch over into the telephoto lens on the Pixel 5 and the telephoto zoom on the S20 FE. So you can see how that compares to the Pixel 4a's main camera and how they're both doing on these lenses here. So I'll zoom back out to the main lens on all three. And again, I'll pan around this way and we'll walk over into some darker conditions here in 4K. You can also check out the stabilization here in low light. In 4K, all three should still be stabilized. And of course, again, you can see how it handles the changing light into these darker lighting conditions here at 4K. Sometimes it's darker at 4K, so I like to do a low light test in 1080p and comparing that to 4K. And again, we get to the dark area here. You can see how it handles the sidewalk lights. Looks okay in the viewfinders on all three. Up into that night sky, we actually have some stars out. I don't know if you can see that. We usually don't get those. And I'll pan over into alleyway again. You can see how it handles that. A little bit of a lost focus again on the FE. Let's try to tap the focus again. And that seemed to clean it up. So again, here you go with the 4K test and some low light on all phones. Hey everyone, so here is some front-facing footage and some low light from the Pixel 4a, Pixel 5, and the S20 FE. So you can see the bright lights behind me. Kind of see how it handles some of those lights back there. And obviously this is a pretty well-lit area. But I'll also start walking. I'm gonna test the stabilization on all three of these phones. And I'll start walking over to a little bit darker area here. So you can kind of see how it handles the changing light on the front-facing cameras. And also there's gonna be a fountain over here, so you can hear some running water. So it's a good test for the audio as well, to see how it's able to keep focus on my voice versus that background noise. So again, a little bit darker here, you can hear the fountain running. So hopefully this is a pretty good test about changing lighting conditions for the video quality as well as the audio here with that competing fountain noise. And let me know what you think about that stabilization there, especially in low light from these front-facing cameras. And I'll pan around this way as well. A lot of bright lights behind that way, so a lot of lens flaring, which is expected, into a lot of really bright lights. So there's a quick test of the front-facing cameras here, all at 1080p 30 frames per second. Okay, so we have the same test. This time I've got the S20 FE at 4K 30 frames per second. It can shoot up to 4K 60, but in the dark that 60 frames looks pretty dark, so even in 4K it might look darker. So I wouldn't suggest you go into 4K 60, 4K 30 if you want 4K, but 1080p will generally look a little bit better or a little bit brighter, I think in some low light. But just to test 4K out, because that's the max resolution on the S20 FE, we can compare it to the 1080p max resolution here on the Pixel 4a and Pixel 5. So again, I can start walking, and the front camera on the S20 FE is not stabilized at 4K at all. So you should see a little bit more shake on the S20 FE than you are seeing on the Pixel 4a and Pixel 5. And so again, we'll walk by the fountain. You can see how it handles as the light gets a little bit darker in this area. So again, I just wanted to do a quick comparison so you can see the S20 FE at its max resolution of 4K up against the max resolution on the Pixel 4a and the Pixel 5. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of the comparison between these three phones in a bit of low light here. Hey everyone, so I just want to end this video with some footage from the front-facing camera here indoors, because pretty much everything I showed you was outdoors. I've got an LED light here to the side of me to help with the lighting here on my face. So if you got some extra lighting, this is what you might expect. And if you don't, and you just have basic indoor lighting, like I've got a ceiling light up here, I turn off that LED and this is pretty much what you might get here. So less than ideal, but I think most people will be filming indoors with pretty much just their basic home lighting. And so all I've got again is that ceiling light. Of course, if you have a warmer bulb, you might get a warmer tone. That's a white light, so it's gonna be a little bit cooler here otherwise. But again, the pixels are at 1080p, so the 4a and the 5 limited at 1080p on the front-facing camera. I've got the S20 FE running at 4K 60 frames per second, which is its max resolution and frame rate. And indoors, it might be a little bit darker now because at 60 frames per second, it's not gonna be the best and a little bit more low light. So if I turn on the LED light again, this is the quality that you might be getting there. So now that you've seen all the footage for yourself, all the photos and videos, let me know in the comments which phone you liked best. What do you think about the pixels? Do they perform any different? Personally, to me, if you're just looking at camera performance and you don't need an ultra wide angle camera and you like the Pixel, there's no need to upgrade to the 5 if you ask me. I think the photos are pretty much comparable. Although if you're looking up to step up the video, I think the video on the 4A is still pretty good, but I think with the 5, Google has actually improved the color a little bit more. So I think on the 4 series and below, the colors have been pretty washed out. I think on the 5, the colors are looking a little bit more vibrant, not overly saturated, but definitely a little bit more pop to the color on the 5. So I think that's an improvement there. Also, the 4K 60 on the 5 is a big improvement. I think it looks really good and comparable to some really advanced phones out there. So if you're looking to upgrade your game on video and you're coming from a previous version of the Pixel, I think the 5 is a good fit. Otherwise, if you're just taking mostly photos, I would just stick with a previous Pixel, because like I showed in my other video, between the 3A, the 4A, and the 4, and now that you've seen the 5, still photos, even portrait mode, pretty much look the same on all previous versions of the Pixel, with maybe slight variations, including low light shots with night mode. So again, for photography, I'll just stick with previous generations of Pixels, no need to upgrade. If you want advancements in video, and you take a lot of video, I think the 5 is going to suit you well for Pixel. If you like how Samsung does its cameras, its photos and video, I think the S20 FE is pretty much looks like pretty much a lot of the other Samsung phones out there. So if you want a little bit more pop to your colors, I think you're going to like the S20 FE. I think it's fairly much on par with other Samsung phones and kind of their approach to how they take photos and video. So it just depends on what you like. If you want things more natural, Pixel. If you only primarily take photos with your Pixel, I would stick with the previous versions. If you want, again, more video on the Pixel, take the 5. And if you like what Samsung does, the S20 FE is definitely comparable at a much lower price point. So again, it's just going to come down to what you prefer. But again, I want to hear what you have to think. So let me know in the comments which one you liked best, which one you thought performed the best and why. And we'll continue our conversation down there. And as always, thanks for watching.